the dwarf, the cripple, and the
pancreatic islets of Langerhans.
Willkommen, bienvenue, konnichiwa, ni hao. It's time for the Hermes Inquisition yet again, episode 383, on Sunday the 13th of July 2025, a rather hot one tonight.
It's hot. It is hot.
Yes, thanks for joining us. I'm Phil.
I am Ben.
And I'm Matt.
And tonight we're very happy to be joined by a returning guest, Debbie Elliott. How are you doing, Debbie? Can you hear us?
I can hear you indeed. I'm very happy because it's nice and warm.
Yes.
I like hot weather.
Yeah, even this hot. How hot is it where you are?
It was 40 last week. I believe it's something in the late 20s today.
Blimey, where's that? Cardiff?
I'm on the border of London and Kent.
Blimey, 40's hot.
It's been a while, hasn't it? Has it been about 2 years since we last spoke?
Yeah, it has been. And I had to invite myself back on because you keep talking about Ouspensky and saying you're reading his books. So I thought I'd get in touch.
Yeah, I think there's only one that I've not read so far. But he's one of those guys who he's had such an influence on me that he tends to pop into my mind when you talk about certain subjects or certain points of view. So I guess that's why he keeps recurring in that way.
I saw what you did there. Bit of recurrence.
Well, how did you first hear about Ouspensky?
Actually so I was a member of the Philosophical Society, which he was a member of at one point.
Right.
And then in 1997, I met John Anthony West. I'd already heard about Gurdjieff, but he actually got me into Gurdjieff.
John Anthony West?
Yes.
You met him?
Yeah, I went to Egypt. I went on one of his tours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I actually was in a motorcycle accident in 96 and I got paid out a lot of money because it wasn't my fault, of course.
Yep.
And with that money, or some of that money, I paid myself to go on one of his tours because they used to be quite expensive. And so he introduced me to Gurdjieff, which then would lead you to Ouspensky, because Ouspensky was one of Gurdjieff's, I wouldn't say followers, because I don't think followers is the right word, but he carried on the Gurdjieff work in his own system.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But I've always had a bit of a link with Ouspensky, actually. We actually share a birthday.
Oh.
And we both got thrown out of school for being rebellious. He painted some graffiti on the wall at school when he grew up in Russia.
Right.
And he did it in front of an inspector, so he got thrown out. And then he got into writing for journals and newspapers, and I got into writing for small press, not quite the same. But and then we both, I believe, at about the same time, started looking into all these different theories of what is time and dimensions. But I never really understood that, where he seemed to be able to write books on it. He went traveling, I went traveling. And when he came back from his travels, he was a bit disenchanted by the gurus he met in India and things like that. And I could probably say the same thing of my travels. I never went to India, but my other ones, but it was through my travels that I got introduced to Gurdjieff. And it was at the end of Ouspensky's travels that he was introduced to Gurdjieff in person. He met Gurdjieff.
Yeah. When was he around, Ouspensky?
So he was born in the late 1800s. I can't remember the exact date. He died in 1947, which is quite an interesting year. A lot of people died in the year 1947, including Crowley, Nicholas Roerich, Anandu Kumaraswamy. It's like all the great mystics all died in 1947.
Is that a coincidence?
I wonder. It's strange, isn't it? It's peculiar and others I can't think of off the top of my head, but then for quite important to me in my own path and readings over the years.
It's
It's just
interesting.
weird that they all died that year.
Well, it's interesting you bring up Crowley, because some people theorised that Crowley was well, I don't think it's any secret that he was a spy. It was more a question of whose side he was on. And there's also rumours about Gurdjieff possibly being like MI6 or something. Have you heard about that?
Yes, they believe in his records in England. They had him down as the man called, really as an Englishman called Frederick Dottle, and that he spied, as you were saying, for all the Russians and the Turks. And that's how J.G. Bennett met him, actually. J.G. Bennett was another one of the people that started working with Gurdjieff in the system. And J.G. Bennett was in the army, and he was sent to go and find out if he was a spy. But J.G. Bennett met him and became enamored with the work that Gurdjieff was teaching, what some people call the fourth way. So Gurdjieff himself only said that once or twice, the fourth way. He called it the system, as Ouspensky did as well, or the Gurdjieff work.
I think the fourth way comes out of that, as far as I understand it. We've mentioned it recently about the way of the fakir, the monk, the way of the yogi. So I think that I guess the naming of it as the fourth way has just been sort of for illustrative purposes.
Well, Gurdjieff and Ouspensky taught it as the three different ways of what you've just said. So the fakir would be from the instinctive moving centers, because they called them centers, the fakirs would go and do exercises and go and keep their arm up for years and years or something, didn't they? They worked on their bodies, whereas the monks would go into a monastery, into a cell, and work on their emotions. And then the yogi would be coming more from an intellectual point of view, where Gurdjieff was trying to bring it so that we use all three of them. So that's why it was called the fourth way. We should be working with our minds, our intellectual centers, our emotions, our emotional center, and our, what he called his moving instinctive center, your body. And, because Gurdjieff said that we're all robots, we're all mechanical. Automatons was the word he used. Yeah. And Ouspensky said the same thing. We're all asleep. That's why I loved your title for this. Wake up, sheeple. Because we are all asleep, because we're not really awake to see what the real world is. We're all following like a mechanical way of living, and we live in a rat race, don't we? We're sort of told what to do. It's like we've been enslaved in some kind of way, but how that actually happened back millennia ago, or whenever humanity was around, there's all different theories, isn't there? Whereas Gurdjieff says it's because when Earth was made, and they all believe in a divine source. Gurdjieff called God his endlessness, was making this universe. When this world was made, there was a little hiccup. So he had to send all the angels down to fix the problem with the earth. But to stop us humans seeing all the angels and everything, they put a kunda buffer, he called it. It's like a towel on the bottom of our spine, on our coccyx. And it made us see everything upside down and topsy-turvy, and became materialist. And then when they fixed the earth, they took that towel off. We didn't wake up. We liked living in that material world. And so that's why we're all sheep. We all follow the herd, don't we? Gurdjieff calls it a lunatic asylum. And he says his system is and Ouspensky's trying to do the same thing, of trying to wake us up, getting in touch with our lower centers and make them balanced. So that'd be your monk, your fakir, your yogi, bring them together in a fourth way, so that we can then connect with our higher selves, which we've lost connection with.
Yeah, we're kind of like on autopilot a lot of the time, and we don't sort of stop and think about what we're doing. It's like when what's the funny, what are you laughing at?
Sorry, I just saw Matt's can come up.
Oh, right.
Someone's just asking me what I'm drinking.
Prime example of a man number one sat next to me.
Yeah. Is there a zero?
But we've all had that experience. If you drive, like you'll be driving your car and you'll pull up, and you'll have essentially no conscious memory of what you've just done. You've just sort of arrived there somehow. And you're like, your subconscious has pretty much taken over, basically. It's run all the systems. It's done the perception. It's looked for hazards and threats. It's adjusted your speed. It's just taken care of everything. Your mind's just wandered off. Your conscious mind has just essentially been away with the fairies for 30 minutes while you arrive where you are. And that's sort of like a macrocosmic example of this thing, but there's a grander sleepfulness that we're suffering as well, would you say?
Yes, absolutely. Because we spend most of our days, we think we're in control of ourselves, but actually we just follow along, and we just follow one incident after another incident and after another incident. We never, as you were saying about the car, you don't think about driving once you've learned. You do when you first start, and that's practicing, and you're using your instinctive moving centers, is learning how to drive the car. But after a while, once you know how to do it, because I remember when I first learned to, like I'm sure you did, first learned to ride a bike as a child, it's so scary and it takes ages, doesn't it? But then when you've got it, and it's the same with the car. I actually used to ride motorbikes, and I remember, because I started the Gurdjieff work in '97, suddenly realizing I was doing exactly what you've just said, and I'm like, I'm on a motorbike and I don't actually remember getting from A to B, really. So I tried to become more awake. And one of the exercises, I think it was Trevor John you had on recently, and he was saying about having the midday one, and you'd always forget. Like suddenly it's 12:15, and I'd forgotten to do my exercise of remembering myself at midday. So what I started to do in that remembering exercise is really, you just take a moment to think, where am I? Who am I? Sense all your body. But I kept forgetting at midday as well. And then I remembered, I grew up with Uri Geller on the TV all the time. And he used to go on about 11:11, didn't he? And I'm one of those people who does always seem to look at the clock when it's 11:11. So I decided I'm going to do my exercise at 11:11. And so that did start working for me, work 11:11 in the morning and 11:11 at night. I suddenly know I'm looking at the clock. Right now I'm going to sense myself. I'm going to think, who am I? Self-remember and self-observe. What am I feeling? But most of the time, we're not sensing ourselves at all. We're just going about doing things willy-nilly.
Yeah, we're generally unconscious. And I remember when I read The Fourth Way, sort of trying to practice this thing and of just stopping and recognizing your own consciousness and who you are, and what just being present, I think, is probably the modern way of saying it, being present in the moment, or mindfulness. I think it's maybe not a new idea, but again, they've developed a system around it, haven't they?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the mystery schools. So mystery schools used to teach all this, which only certain people would have got into. And I believe back in the ancient days, the teachers probably went out looking for children who were probably a bit more awake, and taking them and making them students, because it doesn't suit everybody. Not everybody has I must admit, from a young age, I knew life was weird and odd, and I saw all the adults lying around me. And that's one of the things that first notices about Gurdjieff and Ouspensky talk about, is that people lie all the time. People very rarely tell the truth, rarely say what's really happening. And isn't that weird? That's why the whole world lives in chaos, because everyone's lying or putting on masks, pretending there's someone they're not. Where this work is to help you find your real I. But it takes effort. But it's difficult to talk to people who aren't interested in any kind of other path than any kind of spiritual or soul path, because they're too busy already thinking, no, I am awake. They take it as quite an insult. People don't like being told you're asleep, you're a sheep, but we've all seen the herds, especially in the last few years. Yeah. There's a big lot of them out there. Yeah. And they do a lot of mechanical talking. They just talk about any old thing. I used to detest going to work with people and having to listen to them go on and on about EastEnders or Bellenders, as I like to call it, and things like that. That's not real talking. That's just mindless talking. And they probably tire themselves out with it. All this kind of excess work tires out people, where once you start becoming aware of, right, I'm doing mechanical talking, which I hope I'm not going to do in this show, but one of the quotes I have of Ouspensky, he does say not to talk as if you know. So I don't feel like I'm a teacher or anything. I feel like I'm just passing on what Ouspensky and Gurdjieff were saying, but I don't want to go into mechanical talking myself. Yeah. So I try to be conscious of what I'm saying to you or to anybody else. But then Gurdjieff says you do, and Ouspensky, that you have to wear a mask in public. When you're at work, you have to fit in. So you put on a mask. But as long as you're aware that you're wearing that mask to fit in, inside, it's like inner considering. You're aware that that's not the real you. But if you showed them the real you of, I don't like listening to you go on about bell enders all the time, they'd get upset and hurt and you'd end up with no friends, wouldn't you? So yeah, it's an interesting system, but hopefully it will help you take yourself out of mechanical, automatic ways and start reaching to your higher centers. And your higher centers are up in the spiritual other realms. They're like our higher versions of ourselves, and they're always talking down to us. Some people see it, for example, he's talking about Crowley earlier, he'd have said it was your higher guardian angel. Gurdjieff and Ouspensky say it's just higher centers. Like some people associate them with chakras, and we're working at the moment in our lower centers when we're just going through our usual day-to-day things, but our higher centers are calling down to us all the time because they want us to connect and reach back up and develop ourselves. And maybe that is what this living on this planet is all about. That's what I think the Gnostics were teaching us, to escape the material, dark, evil world.
Yeah.
Debbie, is this related to, and I'm just having a flashback to A-level psychology, Matthew, so you might have to help me out here, but the Freudian things, like id and superego and ego, being different layers of self. I don't know which is which. I've run out of.
I know a lot of people from Jung went to Gurdjieff, so it's more of the Jungian style. Freud was probably
he was a lot older, wasn't
he?
About
the sex a lot, doesn't he? And the Oedipus complex and things like that. Where Gurdjieff does say we also have a sex center in us, and that sex center is really what people like you can use to create things, not just babies, but also great art, great writing, if you can connect with that sex center. So I think that he probably wouldn't have gone with the Freudian, but it is interesting. Maurice Nicole, he's one of the people that writes a lot of books on Gurdjieff and Ouspensky. I highly recommend his commentaries. He studied under Jung himself and went on to start his own practice. And there's a few others that came from Jung and then went on to Gurdjieff. And of course, Jung probably in his day, when he was alive, he couldn't tell everyone about all his spiritual journeys and his red book. And I believe his black book's been released now of all his paintings and drawings of his spiritual encounters, and that Jung himself had a daemon that he used to talk to. He could never announce that when he was alive, could he?
No, he'd be struck off the psychology register. He'd be shunned, humiliated. What a kook. What a nut job. Don't listen to anything he has to say. It's obviously worthless. One of the things, going back to like the Freudian guy and your different levels of ego, superego, id, whatever. One of the things that stuck with me is in The Fourth Way, Ouspensky talks about the sort of fractured nature of our psychology, and part of the aim is trying to unite these I's, like a capital I, like I meaning me, and that we're made up of maybe a dozen of them. And I started recognizing in myself, like the way I acted in different circumstances. You put on, you're a different person. You know, I'm a different person in here with these two than I am with my kids or with my mum and dad, or if I'm meeting a customer for the first time. We act. We can't be ourselves all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might even be more than 12 eyes. There are many people that have lots of eyes. But when you start doing the Gurdjieff work and start becoming aware of exactly what you've just said, how you are different with different people, and that, like when you're out socializing, you're a different eye. The Gurdjieff work starts making you notice them. And it's like, oh, that one's come out to play now. And this is also why we can't keep awake, because different eyes keep coming in. You know, he does the story about the man that wakes up in the morning and his butler hasn't brought his newspaper, so he's got the ump. And then he goes into the bathroom to brush his hair, and he keeps dropping the brush, so he's getting more irritated. And then he gets taken out for a drive by the chauffeur, and he goes to a tea room, and a lovely blonde lady, so he's all annoyed because everything keeps going wrong. And then a lovely blonde lady gives him a nice smile and a little wave, and suddenly he's a completely different person. He's a different eye. The eye that's feeling all flattered comes out. But they happen so quickly that most people don't notice them or don't even think that they have all these different eyes. And that was like what you've just said for me was one of the big wake-up calls of like, oh my God, that's not me. But they're not really us. They are masks. But inside us, Gurdjieff says there's an essence. So these eyes are all different personalities that have been built up from your peers, from your family, from your schooling, your school kids. Want to be cool with all your schoolmates. I'm sure you're all cool in your little shed when you three are all together, you know, but you'll behave when you're with your mums and dads. But they're all personalities. And what Gurdjieff's helping you to do is to become aware of these different eyes. And once you start noticing them, then a deputy steward eye comes in. And this deputy steward eye starts taking control of them and putting them all into a little bunch. Ouspensky actually explains it as like living in a house and you've got 4 rooms, but you're only living in the 2 downstairs ones. You're not taking control of yourself so that you can reach all the different, the higher ones would be in the higher rooms, the higher version of yourself, which would be your essence. Your essence is the true you, the real you. But do any of us ever see it? I don't know. I don't know if that's, you know, when you become enlightened, maybe. But I am aware of myself, just to give people encouragement from doing my own work over time. My deputy steward definitely came through and started taking control of my, or pointing out which eyes were out. So I hope one day my essence would come through. You know, like I suppose now when I'm doing this, I've got an eye that wants to go, look at me, I know all about Ouspensky. When I don't really know all about Ouspensky, but I like, there's another part of me that wants to pass on information. So there's a couple of eyes inside me are arguing.
Right. Is there not an element of integration then, I suppose, you know, taking parts, or I don't know, if you're beginning to recognize that you have the capacity to change in different environments, that you can acknowledge that and somehow integrate it, and then that somehow gets you to this, what was it called? The overseer.
Like the deputy steward comes in, and then the essence will come through
the
later.
Essence, yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Steward's got them sorted. Yes,
Yeah.
in a way.
Right. Okay.
It should be called the all-seeing guy.
The being guy.
Yeah. And I've been desperate to say we all wear masks.
Yeah, it's true, man.
Yeah.
True.
It is. It's true. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure like modern psychology has different names or nomenclature that relates to a lot of the similar sort of ideas. It's just, this is more, I don't know, psychology is guessing its infancy in the, you know, early 20th century.
There must be people out there who can't wear masks. They can't have more than just their,
I don't know,
their essence.
Because of what, like a trauma or something?
Well, I was going to say a disorder, but it may not be a disorder. It may be a higher level of
they're integrated
being. Yeah.
Well, let's take people on the autistic spectrum. We would often class them as being socially awkward or not comfortable in social situations. Maybe we're looking at that the wrong way. It's just that they're actually being their true selves.
They're maskless.
It's just where, they won't fit into, they won't play the game that we all play, changing our personality to fit the situation. They just tell it how it is, and soz.
Absolutely.
And we've got the wrong end of the stick.
Yeah.
I used to have mixed views about autism. You know, I definitely went through a phase of thinking it was all to do with vaccines and things, because there wasn't so much of it, you know, in other centuries. But I wonder also if there is a case of, because I'm now been speaking to quite a few people. This is actually from the few anthroposophy people are talking about how they've been working with these autistic children that have been telepathic, and then they're creating in other dimensions spaces that they can all meet through. It must be through their minds, some kind of telepathy.
The telepathy
and
tapes.
I'm still quite new on it. The telepathy tapes, yeah, things like that. And they're not the only ones. So I'm wondering if this is perhaps some kind of, I'm not saying it's a new superhuman, but superhuman is often in the Ouspensky work, how we should be attaining to become the superhuman. But Ouspensky, Gurdjieff, all of, like Steiner, all of them were saying humanity will be at a pivotal point in 100 years, which is this time. So maybe it's gone past that pivotal point. So new humans are coming in that are going to act differently, like the autistic children who will become autistic people, to perhaps stop themselves being caught up in some kind of mechanical automaton way. I don't know. I still need to do research into that, because it does sound, it's, you know, could be quite conspiracy in some ways. But if humanity is evolving, because Gurdjieff says, and others, that humanity is on a pivotal point, we are either going to evolve or we're going to devolve.
It's really interesting you say about there being kind of less autism, I guess, in previous centuries, but that kind of lends weight to the argument the position we've just created, in that perhaps centuries ago, there were a lot less masks. People were doing a lot less things and interacting a lot less than with other people than we are now. So you wouldn't have to have as many masks, and therefore potentially someone who had no mask would be less obvious than now, where, you know, we do a lot of shit, you know. God knows how many masks I had if I had to count them, but there would be loads because you'd have one for each.
I just think it was called different things in the history in previous times. Basically, you know, maybe it was witchcraft, you could say.
Yeah,
with certain skills, you know, like savant level kind of autism, I guess.
I was giving humanity more credit than was due then, I think, in the past. But yeah, you're right. It's probably just called something.
And I suppose what's happening now is that what is considered autistic. So it used to be
spectrum's widened, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, you know, it's like the Overton window kind of thing, I suppose, isn't it? Where it's kind of shining on. And yeah. So like in the past, you were just quirky. Whereas now, because there's more knowledge about it, and also I suspect because people can make money out of it, private companies, because there's a 3-year waiting list to be assessed, you know, on the NHS, that a lot of people are being diagnosed or assessed, I suppose, as having autism that wouldn't really have met the criteria like 30 years ago. Basically, you just said, no, you kind of just a bit socially awkward or whatever. And I appreciate, you know, there are other things associated with autism other than that. But yeah, I suppose in the past, I guess it would have been called a different thing. I guess if you could get on with life to a certain extent, you just wouldn't have been called autistic. That was the other thing I was going to mention. It was Asperger's was the more, the less intense end of it as well. And that's been got rid of, essentially. Nobody gets diagnosed with Asperger's. It's autistic spectrum disorder.
It's still disorder, isn't it? Are they changing that?
To condition, I think, is the new terminology.
Yeah, ASD.
I think.
It's interesting what you said about in the past. Also in the past, as you said, you'll be working. If say you was a farmer or a baker, you'll be doing your work. Everybody would be getting. You wouldn't be needing, like today, everyone's being influenced. Be from your adverts and things. You should be wearing these clothes and wearing this perfume and driving this car. There wouldn't have been any of that. So people probably would have been more truer. And we did, when I was in one of my first Gurdjieff groups, we were doing a lot of study of some of the native tribes that were still around. And Gurdjieff, when he was alive, and I believe Ouspensky said it as well, said they were probably the most truest to their essence, because they weren't, like exactly what you've just said, they didn't have to put masks on.
Life was simpler.
Well, I suppose that's the other thing is, just, you know, I imagine there's quite a lot of people that specialize in something and find that quite interesting and fulfilling, that you probably, if you assessed them, they would come out as autistic, basically. But because it's not maladaptive, it's not an issue, and because they don't see it as an issue, it's not a problem, basically. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but back in the days before offices, there was none of that sort of concern, was there? Like you say, Debbie, you were farming, you got on with your animals or whatever, and that was pretty much it. You had to go to the shop or say hello to a handful of people. You didn't have to go to an office and talk about Bellender's.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The world's moved on so much in the last 100 years. Life is unrecognizable to the average person.
Yeah.
And if you don't flex to fit in it,
you get labelled.
Going to be labelled.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said with that. It's a huge and complicated topic, not really related to Ouspensky. So.
Oh, sorry.
No, I know. I was going to say that we've gone off on a bit of a tangent.
Yeah. Let's pull it back. Going back to the Fourth Way. I read the Fourth Way. I think it was the third Ouspensky book I wrote.
Wrote.
And wrote.
Whoa.
Whoa! Well, which mask was that? The fucking egomaniac mask.
Again.
They're Ouspensky.
It's pretty much welded up.
Or you just remembering, maybe he was Ouspensky in your past life or something.
Well, maybe. Yeah, he died in the 50s, 40s, didn't he? So you never know.
Could be.
Yeah.
I
So
doubt
he
it.
believed in recurrence, so
Yes.
he didn't reincarnation. His was about recurrence, and you live your life all over again. When you die, you go back and be
Now,
feel again.
didn't he believe in, like, rather than reincarnating into another person, that you live the same life over and over again?
Yeah, and recurrence, yes.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm beginning to go that way myself. I believe that is probably why we have deja vu. I think also the whole point is that every time you're probably improving yourself, and people like yourselves and other people like me and others who have been following this path, this kind of a spiritual awakening path, because we're not awake, we're waking up. Maybe next time we'll be even more awake, and then next time we'll be, until we reach enlightenment by doing the same life over and over again.
Yeah. Does everyone live the same life over and over again? Because
That's what
all
they
the
believe.
interactions that you have with the other people would have to be matched on their side.
It would, but if you changed, maybe you wouldn't lead the same life. Have you read Ivan?
You'd also
Ouspensky's
destroy theirs,
book?
though, surely.
Sorry?
You'd also destroy their life if you change.
But maybe they would go on another path. But I know this sounds really awful. I used to think I was here to save the world. I've realized, no, you're here to save yourself. So if you're going to improve yourself for the next life, it sounds awful, but the other people are being left behind, but then they will pick up somewhere along the way, or maybe they'll learn from you. Maybe you would still meet again.
Fuck them. It's fine.
So I'm coming along more and more to this kind of, I think this is all just a chance again and again to restart your life. But I do highly recommend Ouspensky's little novel about that, The Strange Life of Ivan Ouspensky. I don't know why it's not been made into a movie.
That's the one I haven't read yet. It's the one I haven't read yet.
So is there an end to recurrence, or does something happen eventually, or do you just do it over and over again for eternity?
Yes. What you're doing is you're developing all your different bodies. So it's not just your physical body, you're developing your astral body, your etheric body. And Gurdjieff and Ouspensky use the term the Keshjan body. And that's where your soul is kept. Your soul is eternal. Your soul is your essence. So that's always coming back anew. But the whole point, which is the same as what the Gnostics are telling us actually in the Gnostic texts, is you're trying to improve yourself and reach enlightenment of that. You release the soul finally from this earth. And you might have seen a lot of Buddhist pictures, you're breaking the wheel of samsara, breaking away from this and going to the next level, the next stage of whatever it is that's further on. Steiner would say you'd go and become an angel. I think Crowley would probably say something along the same lines. Gurdjieff says that you would be with your Keshjan body, if you're still worthy, if you've got a good soul, you would go on to the next stage of whatever it is that his endlessness, the God, wants as part of the continuing creation of the universe, the continuing, everything's evolving all the time. So, it's not exactly a heaven afterwards. You're going up to the next stage, which all sounds quite exciting, I think. I'd love to evolve and become the next stage of whatever a human is.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'll just go back to the fourth way. I'm really glad that it wasn't the first Ouspensky book that I read, because I probably would have stopped and never read any of the others. Because it's not like a normal book. It's more like lectures, as far as I remember, like a series of lectures, and it's really pretty dry and repetitive, I found, and hard to get through.
Yes, it was a series of lectures. I believe he gave them for the Theosophical Society originally in Moscow, because a lot of his books actually weren't published till after his death. Some of them he didn't want released. I'm trying to remember if the fourth way he did. I know Tertan Morgana was the one that made his name and made him famous, and was actually the one that made Gurdjieff interested in him, because Gurdjieff sent people out to headhunt him.
Yep.
Tertan Organum is like another like a philosophical book. he says he's carrying on the work of Aristotle's Organum. I've forgotten what it was called.
Yeah,
Not just Organum. And Francis Bacon then wrote a book later on, obviously a few hundred years later, Novus Organum, New Organum, and then Ouspensky wrote Tertum Organum, the third
mode of thought,
or third thought, isn't it? So the fourth way, well, because that's all about all the time and different dimensions, isn't it?
I found them so much more interesting. A New Model of the Universe and Tertum Organum. They totally were up my alley. It was like, I can dig this. It's like extra dimensions and time and space and geometry.
Oh, you love that time and space.
There's numbers, number philosophy, and all sorts, all melded into one. Yeah, the self-help stuff, sort of, I couldn't get through it.
I'm already great. It's fine.
Don't need that.
Helen's asking, which book do you think would be best to start with of his?
If you was coming from because you want to know the system, as in the Gurdjieff system, definitely In Search of the Miraculous. If I do like one-to-ones with people on Gurdjieff, I ask them to read that, or Ouspensky, I ask them to read that first, if you're coming to learn about the system. But if you was more interested in recurrence, definitely his novels. And then what else is it? Tertum Organum, like what Phil's saying, is more about dimensions and time. Because Ouspensky was when he was writing these books, Charles Hinton's book was famous, wasn't it? Which I think was called The Fourth Dimension.
Yes, you mentioned it before, didn't you? He was the American physicist, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he was all about the line and then the triangle, but then if you've got the line and everybody's living on the line and the pencil comes in and they don't know what it is. It's all quite, in a way, complicated. He explains it much better. But then Ouspensky started looking at, well, if we're living in, like a three-dimensional world, which we all know about, then what is time? Time must be the fourth dimension because we're living in time. That's what's eating away at everything. It's eroding everything. Because if we didn't have time, we wouldn't rot and erode. We'd probably just live forever, I believe. And then the fifth dimension was, if you was working on yourself, meditation, if you're really meditating properly, time should stop when you're doing that meditation. And Ouspensky explains all that of once you've understood and can get through time, you would then go to the fifth dimension, which is also part of, I think, Phil, you were saying earlier about the different men, man's number 1, 2, 3 to 7. Well, man number 5, he's the man that can be outside time. And then man number 6 and number 7 are men that are beyond and can go into the other dimension. So the sixth dimension to Ouspensky is probably what we would call today quantum physics, and going into other realms and other dimensions, which he does discuss in the fourth way. I'm sure he does. Or is it Tertum Organum?
The way I remember it was like, I think I read them almost in the perfect order for me personally. I read New Model of the Universe first, which was very broad. It was all about reality, I would say, but a whole swath of topics within that. And the chapter I really loved was the chapter on the extra dimensions, like the fourth dimension. And Tertium Organum is like that chapter made into a 400-page book, 350-page book, essentially. So,
are you quite mathematical, though? That's why I think I struggle with a lot of that. I've only recently been learning how to imagine geometry in my head, like Nikola Tesla used to. Nikola Tesla could just see it like that, couldn't he? I can't do that. And I wonder if Ouspensky could, and see all this geometry of that he puts into the fourth dimension. Are you good at maths?
No, I hated it. It was my least favourite subject at school when I bothered to turn up. I hated maths. But geometry is different because it's getting into sort of ancient Greek. What do you call it? Them sevens.
Pythagoras symbols and things like that.
Yeah, well, the classical education that everyone used to get. Not everyone, obviously. the upper crust used to get the trivium and quadrivium.
Yeah, and they didn't do maths, did they? They did geometry.
Exactly. Yeah. But it's
you need maths.
they're all based around number, but numbers are kind of abstract to us. They don't really mean anything. Whereas the quadrivium all explain numbers represented in different fields. So music is number in time, geometry is number in space. What are the other two in the quadrivium?
And there's architecture. Like the Gothic cathedrals are all built in harmonious numbers, aren't they? So it can be used in things that would help bring us into more of a sacred dimension, maybe, or a more balanced, because that's what it's all about, is becoming balanced.
Yeah.
Especially with Ouspensky and Gurdjieff's work, balancing all your centers. You know, that's why it's great to go. And I often tell people, go and sit in cathedrals, especially the old Gothic ones, not these new ones they've made in the last few years, but you go to the proper old Gothic ones, they've been built harmoniously so that they're capturing the right air, and as the sunlight's coming into them, it's being transformed. Or even, you know, a lot of pagodas or Buddhist temples and things. So, yeah, go to sacred places, or, you know, stone circles, or even just go and sit by a waterfall or something. Yeah, I do notice a lot of people have difficulty going out into nature, because then you also see, like you're saying, about the sacred geometry and all the plants and trees. It's studying all that. It makes an effect on you, and you start thinking differently.
Yeah, you start noticing harmony, especially if you get into these sort of esoteric subjects. There is a thread that runs through different subjects, like music and geometry and philosophy and everything else. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, exactly. Once you start waking up, you can't go back to sleep. But like what you're saying, the octaves, that's very big in Ouspensky's work. The octaves, do to do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. Oh, yes. And the Enneagram, like if anybody ever actually understands what the Enneagram, please do get in touch. I know they have this idea about all the different types of people. I poo-poo that one myself. But Gurdjieff said himself, if you really understood what the Enneagram meant, he said this to Ouspensky, if you understood that symbol properly, you know, I'd be sitting at your feet. And he even said to Ouspensky, if you really understood your books, Turtle Organum, and the other one that you said you've read, that's gone off my head. He said, if you really understood them, I'd be sitting at your feet. Because Ouspensky came from an intellectual centre mainly. So Gurdjieff was trying to help him connect with all these other centres.
Yeah, the Enneagram is that Gurdjieff symbol. It's like is it 9-pointed?
Yeah, so it's a triangle, and then it's got another, I don't even know what to call this symbol that goes along it, 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7. But he says if you understood it, you'd unlock the secrets to the universe. A bit like when Tesla says if you understand the 369, you will understand everything. It's like, oh, numbers, why do they have to be in numbers?
Have you ever seen The Holy Mountain?
When I saw you and your mate were doing that, right, I tried to watch it a few years ago. When it got to the frogs, right, I switched off, right?
Fair enough.
So it was quite interesting to see you two do your explanation of it, because he knew Gurdjieff people, didn't he? I've forgotten his name.
Alejandro Jodorowsky was the director.
Yeah, he was involved in Gurdjieff groups, but I don't think he actually was with Gurdjieff, or he might have been in the last couple of years before Gurdjieff died, because we don't have all the... Gurdjieff never took records of who came, even though in Paris, his flat would be full of people coming every night to listen to him, every night. So, you know, everybody went. And Ouspensky died a couple of years before him. So when Ouspensky died and everybody felt quite lost, so I remember World War II had been happening, Mrs. Ouspensky said to all the students of Mr. Ouspensky, well, just go and see Gurdjieff in Paris. And people didn't even know he was still alive.
Wow.
So, you know, I'm sure a lot of people like that filmmaker went and saw him. But they recently had a tarot exhibition in London with his notebook of how he designed his own tarot deck, that filmmaker.
Yeah.
How'd you say his name?
Jodorowsky.
Jodorowsky, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, because he's still around as well.
Is he?
Yeah, he's like 90. He's still posting every day on Instagram at the age of 96 or whatever he is.
That's right. Yeah, your friend was saying that, wasn't he? But yeah, I congratulate you both for making it through that movie. But I'm not good with animal torture.
No, yeah, you had to sort of. I was uncomfortable with the dogs there was a scene with, you obviously didn't get there, but there's a scene later with dogfighting, and that kind of upset me. And Ryan sort of put his arm around me and said, you know, it's meant to upset you. It's meant to upset you. That's kind of the point, you know. It's trying to get a reaction.
Right, exactly what your friend was saying, Ryan was saying. It is meant to, because it's a shock.
Yeah.
It's the shocks that Gurdjieff and Ouspensky say we need to wake us up. You have a shock. Like, for example, I was telling you about, I used to ride a motorbike. When I got knocked off my motorbike, that was a shock. It did wake me up a little bit. And then I used the money to go to Egypt with John Anthony West, which led me to Gurdjieff. But for most people in life, they don't look at any of this until something happens, like a shock in their life. And suddenly it's like, well, what's life all about? Why am I here? Well, I don't know you guys' childhood, but I was like that from a young age. So I was always a bit of what they would now call an outsider when I was a kid.
I obviously didn't bounce hard enough when I came off my motorbike, because I didn't wake up straight away.
I remember vividly as like a youngish kid, maybe 10 or 11 years old, a thought popping into my head that everyone was essentially the same consciousness. And that when you looked at someone through, you were basically looking at yourself in a mirror. And it was only like a fleeting, moment. But I just thought, yeah, why do we think we're all individuals kind of thing? I obviously didn't think it like that, but it's just a thought that occurred to me. I don't know if it's true. It's probably not.
Well, if you'd come and said that to me, I would have then said that is the divine source inside you, because the divine source watches everything through our eyes.
Divine source, so like Worcester.
I think God, yeah. I believe we all have a God particle in us.
Right.
And he's observing everything through everyone, which is also another reason. If everybody knew that, everyone would start behaving much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, the value is so sad, isn't it? The value of human life is treated so poorly throughout history. And it's tragic in a way. I don't want to get on a downer. If we could recognize how special we are and how special we all are, the world would be a much better place. Less fucking people over, less violence. It's so unnecessary.
It is.
It really is.
Well, that's what Gurdjieff and Ouspensky were trying to teach people. I know you skipped the self-help book bits, but that's all about the inner considering and the outer considering. And Gurdjieff said, everybody you lay eyes on, remember one day that person will die. And it's supposed to make you start thinking, oh yeah, that's another human being.
Yeah. What do you make of the last one I read was In Search of the Miraculous, and there's a moment towards the end of the book where Ouspensky has a very weird occurrence happen with Gurdjieff. Could you maybe explain a bit about that and what you think was going on there?
So you're talking about when he suddenly could hear Gurdjieff in him.
Yeah.
So they're sitting, I think were they meditating or talking? I think they were talking, weren't they? But there was a few people there, so everybody was doing a chatting or whatever, but about the work. And suddenly Ouspensky heard Gurdjieff inside him, but he said it came from his chest. And I think that probably blew him away a little bit at first. But I think he did it again to him later, didn't he, if I remember rightly? But it shows the power of, I'm not saying Gurdjieff was superhuman, but he had been to schools, special schools, and he'd been with special people that had helped him to develop his power. Well, all of us can develop our centers. Gurdjieff became a very famous hypnotist before he started the system. People from all over the world, well, not the world, but around the area of Moscow and Caucasus and that such like, used to come to him for all their drug and drink problems, and he could hypnotize them and make them stop them. And I think that's why Crowley went and visited him in the Priory, because Crowley was hooked on heroin. Because in the 1880s, that's what they gave people that were asthmatic. They prescribed heroin. Wow. And he got hooked on it. I think that's why Crowley went to visit him myself. Though it's very sketchy, the actual account of Crowley going there. But so Gurdjieff learned hypnotism, kind of like the Derren Brown of the days. He was like a mesmerist. But then he made a vow one day when he decided to start teaching people how to develop themselves. He would no longer use his powers of hypnotism and things. He wanted to instead just hone on teaching people how to wake up. But with that time when he was giving it to Ouspensky, however he did it, it was telepathy. But as Ouspensky says, it wasn't like he was whispering in his ear. He could feel and hear his voice, and definitely in his chest. So I think it was to try and wake Ouspensky up, because Ouspensky was just too intellectual and not connecting all his centers. And maybe he needed that jolt, that shock to do something. I also think it's very sad that Ouspensky spent his last few years of his life disappointed that the mystery schools never came and searched him out. He was waiting for them to come and get him, like the masters. And maybe that was also part of why he started to break away from Gurdjieff. Maybe he felt, I don't know, it could be there's so many stories of why Ouspensky and Gurdjieff broke up. I know Gurdjieff himself didn't like people following him forever. He was like, I'm trying to teach you a system so you can go and be free yourself. You don't need to follow me. A bit like a Brian moment in the life of Brian. You know, I'm not the Messiah. You know, you're all individuals. So, I myself have heard people speaking to me, but sometimes they were witchy people, so I didn't react. So people still have them powers.
It was quite shocking to me when I read the book, because I'd read a couple of books before, and Ouspensky comes across as a very sober, credible guy. Very, like you said, intellectual. He's creating arguments, basically, to justify to support his vision of the way the world or the universe is. And he uses logic. He's very logic heavy in his outset. He just comes across as such a credible guy. And then you get into the end of this book and he says, then this guy starts speaking in my head. And it's like, whoa, what is going on? It shocked me, because, you know, I trust him. I don't think he's he doesn't come across as a bullshitter, you know.
He definitely doesn't lie, because that, again, is not part of being who you really are. But I think he did, because I know you said he was sober, but a lot of the biographies about him say he was fun to be with, and he loved to drink at night, and he'd pick his certain friends and they'd drink all night, but talking philosophical things like you three guys do after you finished your show and you have your beers and talk philosophy. I know.
Yeah.
He did turn into a bit of a drunkard in his last few years, Ouspensky.
Did he?
Yeah, he was. And I think that was just, he was depressed that he didn't reach enlightenment. He didn't become a fifth man.
Right.
So I was saying before about men. So man number one is more of a physical person. You're athletes of this world, and man number two is like your philosophers and such like, and man number three, and women obviously, were more of an emotional type. You know, I'm sure you've all met the intellectual types that have got no common sense whatsoever. But man number four are people, hopefully like ourselves, who suddenly thought, right, we want to move on. We don't want to be any of them three. So we're beginning to wake up, and it's a long, long, long path to man number five, who is developed his will. And that's what it's all about. Most people are will-less. Though I will say the best book ever written on how to develop the will is Aleister Crowley's Magic.
Right. Oh, good. Top tip.
Oh, I think it is myself.
I've never read any Crowley.
No, pass.
Nope. Kind of scared.
Right.
Oh, right.
Wow.
I think a lot of people don't realize that his fiction books are all about dark magic, and most of them are against people that pissed him off, like societies that poo-pooed him. But his book on magic is actually all about, it's not at all about magic as in let's go and make a spell. It's about the magic of alchemy, of developing yourself to reach your higher angel.
Yeah.
And Gurdjieff's all about developing your will, and Ouspensky did not have the will to see it all the way through, and I think he got quite depressed about that.
So what happened to him in the end, Ouspensky?
So in the last few years, during World War II, he went to America with his wife, and then he came back. So he had a place just outside London in Virginia Waters before World War II. That was where people used to come and listen to him talk. And he'd have 1,000 people, they say, 1,000 people fitted the hall. So that's how many people would come and hear his lectures, and then he'd have his private groups of teaching the system. Then World War II came along, he went to America, continued teaching out there. After World War II, he came back to Lynn Place in England, and but he was definitely a bit of a drunkard by then, and he had only a few people around him, and one of the people is a guy called Rodney Collin, and Rodney Collin was a British guy. He was one of the guys that actually drove Ouspensky. Ouspensky wanted to be driven to places he used to live at or know or lectured, and he'd sit outside like old places he used to frequent and just stare at them, because he was trying to make sure he remembered them ready for the next recurrence.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
crazy, right?
That reminds me of the kind of like the lucid dreaming thing there, I suppose.
Like practicing lucid dreaming technique.
It is, isn't it?
Wow.
Because he's trying to get it into his astral body so that it stays and then goes into your etheric body. Your etheric body is your life force, and your astral body has your memory. So some people say it's the other way around, depends on what system you're, but he wants to develop his Keshjan body for his soul to go into with all their memories and that knowledge, but then the knowledge you need to turn into wisdom. And he's hoping to die, when he dies he would have moved on, or did he just recur again? And that's why he went. And he had cats, he loved his cats, so there's accounts of him being driven around with the cats in the car, all different cats, lots of cats, not just one or two, lots of cats, going to old places and just staring at them.
Get arrested for that now.
So did he die over here then, in England?
In England, yeah. Ouspensky's buried in England.
Oh, where?
He died in England. He, when he split from Gurdjieff, Gurdjieff had his priory in France. Ouspensky came to England. But before that, before the split, Ouspensky was already in England. There was a lady, Rovamere, who funded Ouspensky to come to England because of Tertium Organum. She loved that book and funded him to set up his own centre. And that's when Ouspensky, going back to when you was talking about Gurdjieff being a spy, was trying to get Gurdjieff brought over, because Gurdjieff was trying to start his society, tried in Turkey, in Germany. They all got shut down there. He ended up doing it in France. He wanted to do it in England, and the British government would not allow Gurdjieff in.
Wow.
Therefore, he was a spy.
Yeah.
Oh.
And there's all this talk that because Gurdjieff went to Tibet, and he was with the Dalai Lama, but there's a mix up. People think he was a guy called Gurdjieff, there's photos of Gurdjieff, who also was like one of the, I forgot what they call him, but he did all the Dalai Lama's work for him. If he had to go and do messages, he'd go off to them. So he was going back and forth. But Gurdjieff also worked out there in the Dalai Lama probably in his 20s. My friend Lade has just brought out a book about Gurdjieff in Tibet, which is quite interesting, not just about the Gurdjieff side of it all, but just also about the links of how Gurdjieff said he was uniting the Eastern and Western ways of religions and philosophies and bringing them together. And he does a very good explanation on it. He'd probably be a good person to interview for your shows.
Oh, yeah. What's that book called?
It's called Gurdjieff in Tibet, and I'll get you in touch with Lan.
Super, yeah. Definitely. That sounds good, yeah. Hey, we're just rocking up to an hour already, Debbie.
Are we?
Yeah.
Do you know when I do these things, it always feels like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
What are you on with now at the minute?
I'm we have a Gurdjieff conference every year, and it alternates America, Europe, and it was in Europe this year. So I did speak there, and I did a paper on love in Gurdjieff work, and I'm actually working on writing that book into a book now. So I'm doing a lot of writing, but I hate typing, so I'm doing it all by hand. Which I think is very important that we do it. We must not lose the technique of writing.
Yeah.
And you're still doing videos, aren't you, on YouTube?
I do, yeah. I've cut them down a bit, yeah. But I've been on other people's shows, working with other people lately, which has been helping. I've written a book on Tesla and Twain about their relationship. So I did a show recently with someone all about Nikola Tesla, because last week it was Tesla's birthday. I'm a great fan of Nikola Tesla. And Mark Twain, I read all his books when I was young. So when I found out they were friends for quite a few years, I went and researched it all in America.
Interesting.
Yeah, my latest book's Monkey Mind, Robot Body, which is all about becoming transhumanism. Again, it's a fiction book, but I'm concerned. I think humanity is going to split. We're going to have the cyborgs and the humans. And I see my vision of the future. Monkey mind, robot body.
It's hard to see any other outcome, really, with the way things are going.
Yeah.
People are already having chips put in under the skin so they can pay quick at Tesco's.
Well, I was actually at a rather boring philosophical summer school, and I actually went, this is so boring. What is it that I should be doing? And the book, the whole storyline of Monkey Mind, Robot Body downloaded into my head. So then I started thinking, maybe this is all a simulation and it's all a AI run, the whole thing. Maybe God's a robot, but it was really weird. The book just downloaded into my head. And I used to hear people talk about, I got a download. I'm like, what's that about? But that's how it happened.
Right. Oh, cool. We'll save that story for another time, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, next time.
Download experiences.
Yeah, are you going to invite Debbie next time?
Yes, I will,
Right,
yeah.
right,
Yeah,
okay.
another 2
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. After she emails you. Right, okay.
Oh, dear. No, it's been good, this, Debbie. Nice to
Yeah.
see
I
you
always
again.
enjoy it with you guys, even though it's only the second time.
Yeah, all right.
Next time, let's do it when it's winter and I don't have to have the windows open, sweltering.
All right, okay.
We won't wait so long next time. You get your
Yeah.
hat trick.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we'll send you
Laura
something.
Free, all about Gurdjieff. Laura Free. Do
Oh,
that
the
next
Law
time.
3. All right, good shout. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
Right. 6
Intriguing.
months. Let's say 6 months.
Right.
There
What
you
does
are.
that take us to?
That's
January.
winter then, isn't it?
January.
Yeah. Right.
That's good.
Perfect.
Jolly good. Right. Well, the links are in the show notes, folks. If you want to follow up with Debbie
Mm.
and check out her content
Yeah.
or her books.
Smash that bell.
Yeah. And we'll be back after a short recess and a cool down.
Yes, cool down.
Yeah.
10 minutes.
Peel the shorts off.
Yeah. Okay. See you, sir. We'll be back very soon.
See you later.
Right. Thanks, Debbie. It's been great.
Bye.
Have a nice Sunday.
Yes. Enjoy the
Bye.
warmth.
See you in a bit.
Bye.
See you, folks.